the seed in our homeland, boys. Let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys. Call it the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.
Once, not so long ago, men gathered shoulder to shoulder. In dimly lit taverns, in smoke-filled club halls, in private rooms above bustling city streets. They talked, argued, laughed, and plotted a future that some of them would not fully see, but all of them believed in. They didn't meet to escape their responsibilities. They met because of them. They were not networking events. There were no name tags or followers, just calloused hands, honest disagreement, and the firm grip of brotherhood. They had a duty that was calling them, something higher than the everyday mundane work in Boston. They knew that their time in history was different. They sensed that something must be done. In order to accomplish that, they met. They sought to know each other for a deeper sense of purpose, a deeper sense of a righteous struggle for more. They saw the target and moved towards it together by the dim firelight in the smoky taverns. But today, we scroll, we comment, we swipe. In an age of endless connection, men are more disconnected than ever. Alone in a sea of noise, unseen, unheard, untested. The taverns are empty. The clubs have vanished. The fire has grown cold. But here's the truth they don't teach you anymore. The liberty we inherited was not born in government halls. It was born in places where men met, face to face. Iron sharpening iron. This episode is a call back, a call to rebuild what was lost, to find the others, to step once more into the circle of brothers where real strength is forged, not online, but across the table, eye to eye, man to man. This is Fathers of Liberty, and today we remember what it means for men to truly gather. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fathers of Liberty. We're so excited to be back with you today and be talking about men's clubs and the Sons of Liberty and the Loyal Nine and the meeting of these guys in dark taverns. We were really encouraged last week by the New Christendom press conference where we were able to launch this podcast. We got to meet a bunch of you guys, and it was really cool just to see how encouraged you were by this thought experiment and just being able to get to know you guys. What did you think, Rashawn?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I really thought that we had a lot of guys who were interested in this time period. We also had a quiz where you would win a free hat, if you got one of the three quiz questions correct. And that was based on, founding fathers time period. And it was really interesting just to see even the lost history that we have. And a lot of us don't know this period very well. But we did have a few guys from the East Coast that got the hats. So that was pretty cool to see. It was cool to see that they had, passed down from their parents or whoever, had taught them these things. So was cool.
Yeah, I was really encouraged by meeting some of those people, and I think everybody was in agreement with everything that we had to say. We met a few Canadians, which was interesting. There was a few foreigners, and so our podcast was very focused on America and recovering the American will. And it was interesting to meet people from other places that were not coming with a founding like we have, you know?
Yeah, I agree. We were really trying to, focus on our founding America. So when you have foreigners, obviously they're not their founding fathers, but they still may be interested in learning about our founding fathers. And what's also interesting about that is, the New Christendom Press Conference was, about safety third. It was about some of the founding fathers, how they founded our nation, and their safety. It wasn't safety first. It was safety third for a reason. They did some things that weren't risk free. They were risky, and look at what it got us. It got us a nation.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I'm really excited for this episode just to talk through the men's clubs. We've been reading, just really trying to look at a bunch of different books that would speak to this time period. And there's some incredible gems and things that you wouldn't read anywhere in even the normal libraries, the normal colleges, the normal public school for sure. And it's just really interesting to be able to dissect some of these things and hear more about these stories and how normal these guys were, and and just being in the pubs and different things like that, meeting and really trying to just rediscover what we had back then. And it's something that's very lost in our society now. So yeah, we'd love to share a few stories. Anything else you'd like to add on that, Rajan, as we walk into some of these stories?
Yeah, I would just say it's really, we're going to be reading about what was going on in this time period with the men. They were gathering at pubs, at taverns, and that was usually after work, and they would discuss these ideas. And
yeah, one of the things that I really like to do with this podcast is just start out with a very compelling story, the cold open, to really get us into this episode. And I hope you guys liked that intro. Really, we were thinking about that a lot, and it's such a gripping way to think about how that we have been, our society now has changed from what it was a long time ago, where men would meet face to face, and men now, they meet online, and or they don't meet at all. And this is a place where men can gather and have rhetoric, have debate, have a beer, and challenge each other. They don't just go watch football. Most often taverns now, pubs now, are very much like sports, chicks, whatever. It's more like debauchery. It's more not a place where you go just to fully relax, but have an intelligent conversation. It's more just relax, cut out, all the stress, and there isn't actual meaningful purpose, I think, at the taverns or the pubs right now.
yeah, and if you think about it, they obviously didn't have television at the time, to
Mhm.
distract them per se.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm assuming a lot of these guys, they were gathering there, they were having these discussions. There was rhetoric, there was real good conversations, and there may have been a few guys who they just wanted a beer and they wanted to hang out and chill, for the evening. But I'm sure it was engaging when these discussions were going on, that they would, jump in on these conversations. And that's really what we've kind of lost, is that the space of time when there's, you don't have to be involved in every conversation, but if it's interesting, you may jump in there. And, we see these, with some of the parties.
yeah, yeah, and they each had their own place in the stories. So we're going to read these stories to you now, guys, and I want you to think about this from a vantage point of each different man, because each of them is from a different book about a different person. and they have unique characteristics on each of them. Some were involved in all the clubs. I mean, most of them were involved in a lot of clubs, but Sam Adams specifically was involved in a lot of clubs. But just want you guys to listen to it, think about it, think about what was happening in this day, and is this something that happens at all now? Enjoy the stories. See you on the other side. One of the groups most closely associated with Samuel Adams is the Boston Caucus, the first major political organization the young man operated in. Shortly after the American Revolution, Reverend William Gordon described the inner workings of the Boston Caucus. More than 50 years ago, Mr. Samuel Adams' father and 20 others, one or two from the north end of the town where all the ship business is carried on, used to meet, make a caucus, and lay their plan for introducing certain persons into places of trust and power. When they had settled it, they separated, and each used their particular influence with his own circle. He and his friends would furnish themselves with ballots, including the names of the parties fixed upon, which they distributed on the days of election. By acting in concert together with a careful and extensive distribution of ballots, they generally carried their elections to their own mind. In like manner, it was that Mr. Samuel Adams first became a representative for Boston. Samuel's cousin, John, also explained the influence the Boston Caucus had in filling positions of importance across the town. Select men, assessors, collectors, fire wards, and representatives are regularly chosen before they are chosen in the town. There they smoke tobacco till you cannot see from one end of the garret to the other. After reaching decisions, they send committees to wait on the Merchants' Club. The Merchants' Club was a select group of ship owners and wholesalers who came together to protest the oppressive tactics of royal customs officials. While the purpose of the group was ostensibly to serve the middle and working classes in Boston, the caucus also consolidated political power in the hands of trusted members of the Popular Party. Just as importantly, its leaders were able to set the agenda ahead of time, allowing them to control which issues would be discussed and when. The organizational power would become especially apparent when Samuel would wield it for political effect during important events in the years before the American Revolution, like the death of Christopher Sider in 1770 and anniversaries of the Boston Massacre. With his father gone, Samuel soon stepped into his vacant position within the Boston Caucus. After he ran for and won his first election in 1747, Samuel became one of several clerks for the Boston Farmers Market. That evening, the Loyal Nine enjoyed a very genteel supper, to which they invited Adams. He joined the Gazette editors Benjamin Eads and John Gill, as well as several artisans and shop owners. The organizers of public demonstrations, the Nine, were on intimate terms with the House. With toasts all around, the group celebrated their cunning in the Oliver affair. They were satisfied not only with their excellent work, they had composed the letter, printed the ads, and posted them as Boston slept, but with profound secrecy surrounding it. They trusted no outsiders and permitted no copies of papers. They were particularly pleased that all credit for the matter fell to Mackintosh. Early the following week, John ventured into Boston to confer with Otis. He could find no trace of him until he called on Samuel. His cousin took him in hand, leading John to a smoky garret. Samuel knew precisely where everyone was. He introduced John to the weekly meeting of the Monday Night Club, which John took to be the inner circle of inner circles. The welcome was warm. It would be some time before he realized what conscription looked like. These were the amiable men who determined how and whether things appeared in the papers. They were responsible for the secret communications and imperceptible influences. Politicians all, they were intimate with and deeply fond of one another. John enjoyed their heady analysis of governors and merchants, elected officials, and demagogues. He praised Thomas Cushing, the son of Adams' former employer, for his constancy. Cushing was, John inferred, famed for secrecy and his talent at procuring intelligence. Otis alternately blazed and raged. No one impressed 30-year-old John as much as his cousin, however. Samuel, he noted, opted always for softness and delicacy, and prudence where they will do, but is staunch and stiff and strict and rigid and inflexible in the cause. Of them, all he had, in John's wide eye viewed, the most thorough understanding of liberty and her resources in the temper and character of the people, though not in the law and constitution, as well as the most habitual, radical love of it, of any of them, as well as the most correct, genteel, and artful pen. John detected on the faces of each man a certain melancholy. Over the last 2 centuries, the Boston Caucus and Samuel Adams have taken on a status of near mythic proportions regarding what they controlled and did in the 1750s and 1760s. While Adams was clearly one of the most influential leaders of the Boston Caucus, one early 20th century biographer described him as using his position to become the dictator of Boston, like the boss of a political machine. The British viewed the Boston Caucus as a front for a more secret network of like-minded patriots who met in places like the Green Dragon Tavern to plot resistance measures. It is hard to determine the actual overlap between the Boston Caucus and other groups like the Loyal Nine, the North End Caucus, and Sons of Liberty. But Adams was definitely a member of several of the organizations, and men like John Hancock and Paul Revere also moved within several circles. Regardless of their actual influence, Adams and the Green Dragon Tavern, where the Sons of Liberty, Boston Committee of Correspondence, and the Boston Caucus all secretly met, have been remembered as the man and location most associated with the Patriot groups. Hey guys, we just want to stop in the middle of these stories and focus on each person. And so that was the story of Sam Adams. We heard a lot about the Boston Caucus. We heard a lot about John Adams and Sons of Liberty, Loyal Nine, and some different things. And we just wanted to stop. And, this podcast is really focused on educating and engaging men. And so we want to really focus on that educate section and be able to tell you guys what was happening in this story. So as we look at this story, and I got Rashawn here, as we look at this story, one of the things that I really start to see is there was a familial tie to these men's clubs, that Sam Adams was doing something that his father had done long before him. And I think that's a really interesting point to see that Sam Adams was following the footsteps of his father, and he learned from that. And there was already kind of this march going forward of men meeting in clubs of different sorts, of different classes, of different types. But it seems that this Green Dragon Tavern was consolidating a lot of these clubs for these men. What do you think about that, Rashawn?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if, Sam Adams' dad and, maybe Paul Revere's dad, or, if it makes you wonder if they were meeting up at these taverns as well. And that kind of got passed down to their kids. And this tradition of, men meeting up at the taverns after work.
Yeah. And the other thing is, these guys were working together, right? So it was merchants, wholesalers, that's what we heard, middle and working class. That's
Yep.
what they were there for. They're also an ocean away from their government. So they are trying to handle a little bit of government. So there's a lot of things being accomplished in these taverns, and very interesting. And
Yeah,
one
and
thing, yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
one thing we had talked about briefly before we even got on here is just the fact that proximity with these men's clubs was so very different than it is nowadays, right?
Yeah. I mean, specifically, they were, right there by each other. They lived close to each other, so they could just walk to the taverns and meet up. They wouldn't have had, text message or email or whatever to contact. And yeah, they would walk down there and meet up. And
Yeah, it's almost like their communication. Instead of having to write a letter, hey, let's hear how that thing went with Paul Revere, right? Oh, I told him that task to do a few days ago. Did he get that? So let's go to the taverns.
Let's go check in, right?
Yeah, we all know where our check-in point is. And ultimately, as this was happening through generations, through continual meeting, they were accomplishing things. There were men getting together and actually making things happen, right?
Yeah, they weren't distracted, I believe. They had a purpose. They would meet up and
yeah. So one of my favorite parts of that really is when it talks about John Adams looking for Otis. And so he's walking through Boston and he comes to Sam Adams and says, like, I'm looking for Otis. You know where he is? And oh yeah, come on, right this way. And then it talks about just taking him slowly through this back room where nobody was knew about. And next thing he knows, it's like the inner circle of inner circles. And everybody's in there and it's smoke-filled room. They all intimately know each other. And John Adams is just kind of like fascinated with this thing. And, John, this is a future president of America, John Adams, being very impressed by these men. And how cool is that?
yeah, it's really cool to see how Sam Adams knew where everyone was, and he was able to lead John Adams into this club.
Yeah. And I think it also became a heck of a force because at the end of that clip, it talked about how it grew to almost mythic proportions. And he says also that Sam Adams also almost was coined as a dictator of Boston through this Boston caucus. And that he was also the mob boss, the political machine. And that so much so that the Crown thought it was where, radicals were meeting and they were planning very seditious things.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then the last thing I think we just wanted to hit at is just there's control. There's a lot of control that's happening in this, from control of the papers, control of the men, control of, what's going on with even the influence and the trust. They said that they would get the ballots together and they would figure out beforehand the elections. And, this is definitely happening in our day in nefarious ways, and not for liberty, but for other means. And then the last part of control is ultimately what this podcast is about, which is the tree of liberty and the sons of liberty, and really raising up some men that would lead the town to resist tyranny. And so yeah, I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah. No, I would agree. That's pretty cool.
Cool. Well, guys, we're gonna go on to another story. This one's about John Hancock and how he was able to effectively use the Green Dragon Tavern. And keep in mind, John Hancock is one of the wealthiest men in the colonies. And so I'm excited for you to hear.
As the implementation of the Stamp Act approached, some Bostonians grew anxious. Heightening nerves was Pope's Day, falling just 4 days later. Fearing violence, Governor Bernard called out 2 companies of militia to guard the town from October 31st to November 6th. But they told him they could not execute his orders. To ensure his own safety, Bernard fled to Castle William, a fort on an island in Boston Harbor. Hancock had a better idea than hiding or using military force. Bring the lower orders together and convince them to act responsibly. Such conciliation was characteristic for a political moderate. Hancock hoped to prevent violence by lowering the temperature in town, efforts no doubt inspired, in part, by self-preservation. In November 1765, he and another leading merchant hosted a party at a local tavern for men from the North and South End gangs. Colonial taverns were spaces where men debated politics, gathered for camaraderie, and built connections. There was no shortage of watering holes in colonial Boston. The town had a strong culture of drinking, but men from different social classes rarely found themselves in the same space. The grog shops at the waterfront catered to seamen and the poor, with maybe a prostitute or two lingering, while the taverns on King Street with higher rents catered to a more elite crowd, as evidenced by the variety of alcohol served, the silver from which to drink, and the plentiful candles illuminating the space. Hancock was comfortable drinking with men outside of his class, mostly because his status in society was so assured. He chose to entertain at a tavern familiar to him and popular with artisans. The Green Dragon Tavern had been around for a century and was a large brick structure between Dock Square and the North End. A connected stable was used by travelers who arrived on horseback, and for those who needed a place to stay, beds were available in the attic. It got its name from the decades-old copper dragon with a curled tail and a frightful-looking tongue that hung out front, oxidized green by the salt air. It was the wonder of all the boys who played on the large parcel of land in front of the building. That night at the Green Dragon, Hancock was a generous host, as he would be throughout his life. He paid a large sum of money for supper and drinks and gave a speech encouraging both sides to lay aside the animosity and to realize the necessity of their united efforts. To protect the town's reputation, he asked for peaceful demonstrations going forward. Hancock possessed a most happy talent of adapting his conversations to the taste of all, which helped him influence men with interests very different than his own. No doubt, also aided by the warmth of alcohol, they all shook hands as they parted. Governor Bernard, however, saw Hancock's party in a more dangerous light. He thought the reconciliation would lead to more powerful riots, not a ceasefire. Hancock united them for other purposes, I fear, than burning a pope. The merchant definitely had ulterior motives, but it was to prevent violence, not stoke it. Not only was he keeping the peace in his town, but he ensured the mob would not turn on a wealthy man like him, as they had with Hutchinson. 4 days later, Pope's Day also had a new and orderly feel. Mackintosh donned special clothes, including a blue and red hat laced in gold. He led his followers and officers, who also wore distinctive hats and carried wands, through the streets. In the afternoon, carts and stages were brought to King Street. They were topped with the customary popes and devils, but this year they also carried hanging stamp men, merging Pope's Day with politics. In a very ceremonial manner, the North End and South End publicly confirmed that they were now allies. The carts and men stopped at the townhouse and asked the legislators inside to contribute to their evening's fun. Bernard, back from his asylum, directed that my people should give money to the pageants. Thanks to the governor and others, the year had been an especially prodigious one for donations. Many contributed from affection much more than from fear, Bernard resentfully noted. As usual, the gangs put the money toward an after-party at a tavern. Hancock and as many as 200 others attended. Mackintosh and the North End leader sat at each end of the table, with Hancock occupying a distinguished position alongside one of them. In just a few months, Hancock had changed his mind about taxation, raised his profile among the lower orders, found ideological reasons to justify his financial interest, and used his important voice to lobby his contacts in London. He was stepping into the role of town leader.
Hey guys, I hope you really enjoyed that John Hancock story right there. That was it was moving. I thought it started out pretty strong with the militia and Hancock, and I really liked that story. There was some moments in it that were just really inspiring, that were talking about really how John Hancock was getting the people together and why, and really what was happening. And so, yeah, what did you think about it, Rashawn? What were some takeaways that you had?
Yeah, so Governor Bernard had left, right? He went to, I think it was Castle William, and John Hancock instead decided to throw this party for the lower class, and which is really cool because he was a wealthy man and he could pay for the party and supply the drinks and the food, and yeah, it's just a cool way. He was trying to bring down the tensions. Tensions were high. Pope's Day was coming up in a couple days, and he wanted to have a speech to try to calm the lower class down, and so they'd have an orderly Pope's Day celebration.
Yeah, we see two very different responses. The Crown is seeking militias, seeking military forces, and Hancock and even Sam Adams and all these other guys, they're just gathering men together. They're not stoking the fire. They don't want. That's why it's really interesting as this develops over years to come with Boston Massacre, Boston Tea Party, things that are going to happen, that the fire is being stoked more, where they're like, we're at the precipice now, but these beginning times was really men gaining status, gaining reputation. And John Hancock is doing that right here. And he's not trying to bring about violence. He's trying to cool it down. And how cool that he chooses, the Green Dragon Tavern, that it's like, this is the meeting place,
Yeah. And that was a historic building, that was there. I don't know if it mentioned it in the story, but something like over 100 years old or something.
Yeah.
And, had that big dragon on the top of the building. That was the focus of all the little boys that were playing in front of it.
Yeah. So it was well known. And really, like, the North, and it says in there that the North and South End gangs were called upon. Like, hey, we're going to invite you guys out. We know you have power. We know you have control. We know that you represent this town, right? And
Right.
And in a way that's inviting them in. And that's the cool thing, that he was crossing class divides here, that John Hancock was willing to do that. And then it talked about, I think 200 men were out at that pub or at the tavern, and it's just crazy just to think about that many guys together for that purpose. And of course, they're going to look at that and say, whoa, I fear what's going on there. I fear what's happening there. And that's a good picture of what we're trying to do here, is have such an amount of men that is fearful to tyrants, and yeah. And so yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. What did you think about him sitting at the end of the table with Macintosh or on the other side, right?
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. He was, like it mentions in the story, he was really stepping into one of the town leaders, by doing that, and just even organizing the whole thing. I mean, 200 guys, that's a lot of men showing up, and yeah,
pretty cool. So guys, we're going to transition, and we're going to give you some feedback of the engage part of our podcast, where we really try to call you guys to more. So initially we had Paul Revere's story of him walking through the ship docks and all these things, but it seemed like it was too long to include in this podcast. So we took it out, but fortunately It's going to be on Patreon for you guys. So that's why we want to push you guys to be Patreon supporters of the show. It's my favorite clip of all three, and I really love it. I think it's pretty cool. It goes into the long room and these men that were there, and really deeper connections to Paul Revere and how a man that didn't go to Harvard was still accepted in these groups. And so just encourage you guys to listen on Patreon, but we will mention it a few times. And that's just a little teaser for you guys. But we hope the rest of this podcast encourages you, and thank you guys. Wow, man. So that is awesome. That is awesome. Just being transported back into time with that Paul Revere story. Just thinking about him walking down the ship docks, seeing all these different bars, how they said that from the lowest class to the highest class, everybody had a couple different pubs, a couple different taverns. And one thing we got to always remember is that Boston was a drinking town. That's where John Hancock would provide big, giant caskets or cases of wine for just the citizens to have for enjoyment, and he would put them outside his house. They were a drinking town, and they provided all the rum for the colonies was from Boston, and so it makes sense that there was taverns, even in the Wild West, right? Saloons, right? This is before the Wild West, right? But yeah, so I just thought some of those stories are really cool, and we can talk about each one of them individually and just kind of pick them apart a little bit. But what do you think about those stories, Rashawn? Anything point out big for you on those?
Yeah, what's interesting is, you hear the story, like you pointed out, the taverns that they had, the different clubs, and it makes you wonder whether they were all intermingled, like the lower class and the upper class, or if there was a specific tavern for the lower class and then a tavern for the upper class.
Yeah, different societies, right?
Yeah, because they kind of had their distinctions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think one of the things that stood out, I think it was in the John Hancock portion, was where they were talking about the Boston Gazette,
Mm-hmm.
and how there was a long room
Mm-hmm.
in the upstairs
Yeah.
portion of the Gazette, and that's where they would meet. A small group of them would meet.
Yeah.
And talk about different ideas and stuff, and then obviously the printer or whatever was right beneath them, so they could take these ideas and they could actually put them to paper and formulate them and distribute them throughout the colonies.
Yeah, they had a tool to really, and that's a big thing about these groups, is there were some that would just meet, at the taverns, just hang out, right, and talk to each other. But there was a deeper connection. These men were seeking, hey, let's make an effect. Let's do something about these meetings. And you think about it in our society, is entertainment is a big thing. Back then, I don't think they had baseball. I don't think they had football. I don't think they had any of this stuff. The talk of the day was liberty, right? The talk of the day was what's going on with the English that are challenging us and taxing us without representation. And so that was affecting their whole life. Each one of them was tied together in this difficult struggle of taxes, of the newest stamp tax or whatever. And so they each had a part to play, and they were all connected in that. And I just think it really spells out a bigger purpose and a need for that. And so we're in a time that's very different, and we have to realize the need. We have to realize, well, we can do this too, and we have to have a need that is important enough for us to get together and for us to really challenge all that's going on in our societies. And so yeah, just to really talk through some of these stories. And I think the Paul Revere one was pretty incredible. One thing I really liked what you were talking about with the long room was that it was an exclusive place, and Paul Revere was the only artisan in the club. And they each of these clubs had specific needs for different type of men. They weren't just, hey, let's all just let's all be ship workers. But they did have those type of clubs as well. They had specific clubs that were like the Artisan Club or the ship worker, the Freemasons. But these were exclusive clubs. And I think in our society now, everything's very inclusive. It's just a world of inclusivity. Everybody gets a prize. Nobody's left out. Everybody's a winner. And when we do that, we take away the exclusivity that is needed to have a valuable, really great club. This is a special men's club that is working to be really leaders in the community, and they're working in the dark because they're fighting for their people, and they're hearing what's happening in the streets, and they're able to, change that with their newspaper or with the different letters that they're going to do to send to England, but only because it was exclusive. They were able to choose certain men and say, no, this is what we need to do, and we need these type of men. Paul Revere was able to actually make metal advertisements for them. They needed him. They needed Sam Adams. They needed all the different people.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is I think there was 11 out of the 16 members of the Long Room Club or whatever. I believe they were Harvard graduates.
Yeah.
And so Paul Revere wasn't, but they still needed some of his attributes and his
expertise. Yeah. And I think this is something as well that we want to highlight in this podcast and we have this on our Patreon. On our Patreon, we have a pretty cool distinction of each type of man. You have the Boston Patriot, you have the Loyal Nine, the Sons of Liberty, and I forget what the last one is, but it's the elite, right? The colonial king, basically, like the John Hancock. But the pictures in there on that Patreon, it's really cool because they're each very distinct artisans, merchants, ship workers. There were different classes, or they would call them the lower sorts or the higher sorts or the middle sorts. And there were distinct classes, but they each knew their area and they were excellent at it. And of course, they wanted to move up and move down and exceed their rank, but they were where they were. And so they each had a really focused effort on being a master at their craft, at being an excellent person at doing their metalworking or doing whatever they were doing. And so I think that's something that is lost in our society, and really the trades are coming back. And that's something that in order for us to really be industrial and grow in our abilities is we do need to connect with these men that have these trades and not think everything needs to be with computers. We need to be able to have skills with our hands, and this inspires people to get together and to look and see, hey, you have a great talent in this. I need that type of person in my life. I need to know a man who can do good woodworking or who can do good car work or can do this thing. It brings about a better class of man and men together.
Yeah. So, what's interesting with that, you're all contributing to each other. And it also, if you do need some work done on your car or something and, you have a guy come over, you're there learning so that you're becoming better as well.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I noticed about our church is that we have different guys in the trades who are expertise in their specific trade.
Yeah.
And so you can reach out to them and you can, ask them questions, or they can come over and take a look at it themselves. And so by doing that, you're building a stronger community together.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we definitely need more of that in your local communities.
Yeah. So to hit back on a few of the stories, the first one with the Sons of Liberty talked about Sam Adams being in the Boston caucus. It talked about all these different groups that these men were in. And man, Sam Adams was they said the man of the town, or the man of the caucus, could be said. And we still have caucuses, political caucuses that happen today. It's totally in the political world. It's pretty incredible to think that Sam Adams' dad may have started the first caucus, and that we hear about them all around now if you're in the political world. But it's just crazy to think about all these different clubs that they were involved in, and to reflect on that. And really, what one of my favorite parts of all the readings was when John Adams was let into the secret group, the secret of the secret, the inner circle of inner circles, where he was let into by Sam Adams. And these were the true Loyal Nine, Sons of Liberty type men that were really starting a lot of the ruckus. But these were the elite guys, and there was only a few that would be let in there. And John Adams had a lot to offer, being a justice or being a lawyer and having the eyes of justice. But what I'm getting at is that there were so many different clubs that these men had time to do, right? They saw this as a benefit to their life. What are clubs now in America?
Now they're just for like entertainment, music clubs, whatever clubs. Like,
yeah, even the word club is totally dance, hang out. It's like seeing the dwindling of our society. You changed what even a word is. And the word club, men's club, is almost offensive in our world. How far have we drifted from where we were that even saying the phrase men's club could make people go, "Ooh,
not sure about that.
Man, that's not only sexist, but it is exclusive. What's going on here? You're racist." It's like, what? Oh my gosh, are you kidding? I just want to have a guys club. This is what's been inbred in us and what we need to take out. And so just to think about that more with men's clubs, like, what does that look like, Rashawn, for us to do that in our modern world? And, do we have something like that happening here in Utah? Have you experienced something like this? And, how do we bring that back?
Yeah, I think we do have that here in Utah, at least from the men from church. And that's something I really appreciate. We have an intentionality there. And they recently mentioned it on the Hard Men podcast, which I thought was great. It was an episode on brotherhood and men needing other men to, get together to do something, to work, to, play games or whatever. But it's something that you're actively doing with each other. It's not just talking about your feelings, or you're just sitting down and you're just discussing, the weather or whatever, but it's something that's, you're either working or you're building something, you're doing something together, and that leads into the I don't know the word.
Camaraderie.
Camaraderie, stronger brotherhood.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do need more of that throughout the country. And it was encouraging. One of the guys that showed up from the East Coast to on the New Christendom Press conference, it was encouraging to hear that they were actually meeting. He had a group that was meeting, and they were talking
awesome
about these ideas. And
yeah.
So we really appreciated that. It was encouraging, and we definitely need those throughout the country.
Yeah.
Just men, meeting up. And that, I mean, you have to be intentional. You have to schedule time. You have to, whether you're going to a church or not, your local community, if you are going to a church, I would start there. I would look at your men in your church, the guys that you're talking with, and seeing if they have time to schedule out, a time where you're meeting up in town and just talking about, these ideas, what's going on in America, how we can make a difference. And yeah, I think that's where we need to start. And then if you're not in a church, I would say that, well, first I would say get in a church, but then from there, I would say if there's a local basketball community or whatever, like a group that gets together, find someone in that group that you get along with, that you've talked with, and start meeting up separately and talking about these ideas.
Yeah.
That could be one way to start something up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we want to push a call to engage at the end of this podcast. We're about two things, which is educating and engaging faithful, patriotic fathers in our society now. And kind of what you're getting at. I think something to observe from these groups is, number one, they were meeting in a tavern. So they were meeting in a place that was relaxing. for them. It was a place where they could let things out. It even said in one of the stories, a Whig could say anything he wanted to, right? A good Whig would say his ire against England. He would be free to do it without having someone coming down on him for what he was saying. So number one, you have to be able to be in a place where it's relaxing, you're chill, and also you can speak freely. You don't got to worry about what's behind your back. And if you got to go even deeper, like we really learned from the long room and from the Loyal Nine, is you got to get real secretive, where you shut off your phones, get it all off. Hey, we're here, mano a mano, we're going to talk about things, and nobody needs to know about it, right? Because it's just us, So that's one thing. It's relaxing. You can talk freely. It's also very exclusive. You have certain men that you've chosen. You've predetermined it. There's a commitment level where you're able to say, hey, we're going to meet together and we're going to do this because I think you're a good man. And I think you have something to offer me. I think I can offer something to this. And I think you can. And I think you can. And you can. And this guy would be good to add too. And why? Because we're trying to come together for a purpose, to get somewhere. So first, you might be meeting just to get to know each other. And then it's like, okay, what do we do now? What is our goal? What is our focus? And so, yeah, just observations from the stories is those things is they were free to talk. It was relaxing. It was exclusive men. They actually had a big effect. And they didn't just have one group. They had many different groups. But in order for us to do that, we really have to step out of this feminist culture. This feminist culture that has constricted us so much, that has made it so that we can't even say to our wives, honey, I need to go. I'm sorry. I got to go tonight. I'm going to go be with some guys. If that's not an open ability for you, then something needs to be done on the front end of just, hey, honey, I think this is going to be better for me and for our family. I think I am going to actually struggle righteously here with another man to debate, to really talk through things and get to know him, and for a cause that is the betterment ultimately of my family, right? So what do you think about that, Rashawn?
No, I think that's good. And you're exactly right. We have to step out of the feminist culture. It's very controversial if you say something like, babe, I'm going to go out with the guys tonight. You stay home with the kids, and keep the home. And really you see, we're lucky enough, I would say thankful enough, to have, or blessed enough to have wives who do that. And they do that joyfully. And that's a rarity. It's a rarity. And they're amazing. And I would say that's one of the reasons, we can even do this podcast is that, they're taking care of our kids right now. They're, stepping up. So
yeah, we got 7 kids representing us right now, 2 wives. And so, they're outnumbered, right? And even to think, Rashawn, back in the Founding Fathers' time, they didn't have birth control. They were having kids. Paul Revere especially had a lot of kids. And they had multiple wives, not polygamy, but that had passed away. Right. Some of them had hardships. And so they had gone through this, but they were free to walk away, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you have to, as the leader of your home, you have to ensure that your wife is being taken care of and things are running properly with the children, and that they're being properly trained and disciplined so that there isn't chaos at home.
Yeah.
Because that will put a stressor on your wife. So making sure that you have that in order before you just run off, I think is very important as well.
Yeah, you can't do this if you have a chaotic house. If you have a mess at your house and you're just going to leave a mess.
No, you need to take care of
You're going to flee a mess.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, we need to have an orderly house. And these were astute men. They had done things. They had excelled in their lives, and so these were not your ordinary men.
Right, and they may even have had younger women helping some of the older women at home. They had other means
Yeah.
to help around the house as well. I don't believe they were just leaving their wives with, 12 kids at home or whatever, 10, 12 kids, and just saying, it's chaos. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go talk about,
Mhm.
political ideas and resisting, the British government. So yeah, I do think they had things in place. So that is definitely a distinction that we need to make.
Mhm.
And, but if that's not where you guys are at, I would highly recommend, having that conversation and putting things in order so that you can go out and, this can be once a week. It doesn't have to be that often, but you're routinely meeting up with guys and you're talking about these ideas. And I think that would be a good thing for our nation.
Yeah, and I think that's rediscovering the old ways, rediscovering our history, rediscovering our founding, getting back to those roots. This was a patriarchal society, and that's a difficult word for some people to hear right now, but it truly is the way that things were going back then. That the men could make decisions, they could lead their families well, and they could move forward. And it wasn't a toxic thing; it was a good thing. That was the role that they had. And so, yeah.
And they were getting these, their culture, they had the Bible. They were basing it off of that. And I would say the Bible is patriarchal. I mean, you see that in, throughout the whole Old Testament.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty cool to think from even that Paul Revere excerpt, that book that we're reading, that they had just read the Bible so much with the literary, the reading was mainly the Word of God. Right. And so these newspapers, this was a time where reading and education was actually new, and being able to read and to be learned. And so what a crazy thing. We are inundated with so much to read. And that's one thing we talked about in the intro, is that we are more connected than we ever had been, but yet we are more disconnected in the ways that we should. And men are not connected, but yet we're all connected through Wi-Fi, right, to something. We're connected to the internet. We're not connected to men, truly. And so,
yeah. And I would say to that too, you have to have a goal. You have to have intentionality, because it's very easy to get caught up and doom scroll on your phone or on Twitter or whatever.
Yeah.
So you need to have a goal. You need to have discipline, self-control.
Yeah.
To put your phone aside
Mm-hmm.
and go out and meet with the guys or whatever, to not be distracted. But also, yeah, I mean, things come up, obviously. We're not, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think just, forging an alliance together to really meet some sort of purpose. And so really, as we've talked about this, we've talked about how are we going to implement this in our world. Our call and our push to you guys would be, after this podcast or sometime, list down, 5 men that 3 men that if you got one guy, it's a start that you think that you would like to learn from, you would like to talk with about a shared goal, a shared purpose. And, send him this podcast, send him this and say, hey, these guys are talking about what the founding fathers did, how they were effectual in creating this great country, striving for liberty together in the midst of having normal day jobs and dealing with things and tyranny. And that's what we're trying to recreate. And you can say, hey, I want to try to implement this. Listen to this podcast. Tell me what you think. Hear these stories about these men who would meet. And these are big names. These are men that accomplished something great in their life. And try to be that start that we're looking for. And write down those men. And first, get to know them. Get to know each other. Make it a habit. Make it a commitment. First meet up. Then start driving your vision or your purpose. What are you meeting together for? And as we go on with this podcast, we're going to start talking about different ways for you to step into your political sphere. We're hearing about the caucuses, right? We're hearing about town hall meetings. We're hearing about all these different things that were happening that they had a very good knowledge of what was going on in their governance. And so we need to also figure out what's going on in our world. What's the tyrannical forces in our world?
Yeah. And I would just say that it can be discouraging. You can look around and feel like, what's my action gonna do, right? What's gonna change if we, meet up, right? Are other people doing this throughout the country? And really, I would just say to that, it has to start somewhere, and it starts with, a couple guys meeting up, and then, it grows from there. And if everyone decides to give up on it,
we'll be lost.
We'll be lost. Like,
and that's what we're saying.
Lost. And
yeah,
we don't want that.
Yeah, this has been lost. We are trying to rediscover. So for us to rediscover, we need to re-engage into this. And so yeah, I think that's really good. Very encouraged by you guys, just being able to talk to a few of you. And we hope that you are encouraged by these stories. We hope that you guys can engage with other men. We hope that you can really identify men in your environment that can make a difference. We do have a book that we would recommend. It's called Building Your Band of Brothers. It's a very good book on brotherhood. It's a very short read. They also mentioned this in the Hard Man podcast as well. And it's a good start. If you'd like to read that book, just really, with another guy, that would be a good way to at least start on some of these things. So anything else you want to add, Rashawn?
Yeah, I would just say, what are we planning on for the next episode?
Yes, for the next episode. So we are trying to cover some more biographies over the next few episodes. So we're walking through this season of Fathers of Liberty. This is episode 2, and we're walking through in this season of Boston specifically as we're leading up to the Boston Tea Party. And we're going to talk about some of these specific founding fathers. Really, I think there's 4 of them that we're going to highlight the most, which is Sam Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere, and John Adams. Those are the guys that I think are the most forceful men that played on through history that we can really glean a lot from. And then we will walk through to the Boston Tea Party, and then we'll see where we go from there. But potentially we're going to try to observe the other happenings that were going on in the other colonies and the other great men that we can learn from a lot. And so looks like next time we'll be focused on either John Hancock or Paul Revere. So we're excited to really step into some of their stories, and hopefully they can be encouraging for you. You're going to learn so much. One thing just to kind of give you a little preview is both of these men are known mainly for things that is really not what they were about. So what do you know Paul Revere for, Rashawn? What's the most important? When you think Paul Revere, what do you think?
Oh, it's got to be his ride.
His ride, right? He was just a rider. He was Paul Revere the rider, right?
Yep. He went to Warren,
Sam
Adams,
and
John
he did.
Hancock.
And that was big.
Yep.
But that's not all he is.
Right.
I was actually told by another guy, the seminal work for Paul Revere is Paul Revere's Ride. And I was like, it may be really good. I want to read it. But I think Paul Revere was known for a lot of other things,
Yep.
right? And John Hancock's main thing that it's still said today, give me your John Hancock. Give me your signature, right? The signature. And yes, he had a big signature. Yes, he went to calligraphy school. He was well trained in his quill. He was a man that even had little special signatures that he would do, they would add on to. But that's not all he was. He was so much more. But history only remembers these men little snippets, and they're lost. They're lost to true history because they have so much more that we can learn from. And they're very incredible men. And we are very excited to tell you about them. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in for this episode. And we're very grateful for you guys and for our Patreon subscribers. Thank you. And you guys are the ones that make this show happen. And so if you'd like to subscribe like to hear more behind the scenes and get some of our thoughts, please visit us on Patreon. The link is on the show notes. And we thank you, and we hope you guys have a great week. And we hope this inspires you truly to find men in your community and to start clubs. So see you on the other side.
See you on the other side.
Fathers of Liberty. Be brave, be strong,
Be ready.
be ready.
Plant the seed in our homeland, boys, let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys, call it the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. Save it from the storm, boys, water down its roots with tea. And the sun will always shine on the old Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. It will grow as we grow, boys, it will be as strong as we. We must cling to our faith, boys, faith in the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.